Hey guys, tonight we slip into the shadows of wartime Europe. Not with guns, not with tanks, but with potatoes. You're cold, damp, and probably hungry because this is World War II, and you're a spy parachuting into occupied France with nothing but a fake passport, some forged ration coupons, and a potato in your coat. Not even a cooked one. The wind howls through the trees as you stumble through the dark, boots crunching frost. Your parachute snagged somewhere back in a hedgerow. The drop went fine, if you don't count landing in a cow pasture. You smell vaguely of hay and regret. Your mission is simple. Contact the resistance, deliver your coded orders, and don't get caught. But here's the twist. You're not carrying a single piece of visible writing, because your messages are scrawled in the juice of that humble spud, invisible until coaxed into view with the right touch of heat. You probably won't survive this. Statistically, most agents didn't. But for now, your jacket is buttoned. Your forged identity card says you're a cheese merchant named Henry, and your most dangerous weapon is a wax-sealed envelope that looks completely blank. Inside, a recipe for sabotage and a note that could get you killed or turn the tide of the war. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and the local time in the comments. I love seeing how far this sleepy little spy network stretches. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your contact doesn't arrive until dawn, so you tuck the envelope into the lining of your coat, where your body heat will start revealing a few faint marks. It's not much, just a whisper of a smudge, the curve of a letter, but it's enough to prove that something's there. You crouch beside a ruined farmhouse, steam curling from your breath, and wait. The thing about potato ink is, it's absurdly simple. That's what makes it so brilliant. The starch inside reacts subtly to the cellulose in paper. Add a catalyst, usually heat or a chemical compound, and voila. The ink darkens just enough to read. It doesn't glow or shimmer. It just shows up, like bad news in the mail. But the best part? It's nearly undetectable. No odd smells. No suspicious sheen, just a page that looks blank until it's time to talk. You learned all this back in training, weeks of drudgery in a foggy British manor-turned-spy school. The instructors were part chemist, part actor, part sadist. One day, it was dead drops in umbrella handles. The next, it was writing poetry with onion juice. But the day they handed you a potato and said, "Ink, please," you laughed. That's when they made you eat your previous report for doubting them. Literally. Tasted like lemon and desperation. Still, potatoes? There's a reason they were so common in espionage. They were everywhere, in kitchens, in stews, in the bottom of bags carried by suspicious-looking Belgians. You couldn't smuggle a microfilm inside a cabbage and expect it to last the journey, but slice a potato, squeeze a few drops onto a brush or even your finger. Write your message. Let it dry. Done. And you didn't need fancy tools. The resistance fighters used matchsticks, bent hairpins, and even chicken bones to apply the ink. One agent used her own earring. Another used her tongue. Don't ask. What mattered was that it dried clear, hidden in plain sight. Like that jug of milk in your training house that turned out to be nitroglycerin. But it wasn't foolproof. The Germans had sniffers, both human and canine, and a few who'd been chemists before the war. Historians still argue whether the Abwehr ever fully cracked the potato method, or if they just got lucky catching a few messengers. Either way, you couldn't relax. Every ink had its weakness. Lemon showed under UV. Milk went sour. Urine, well, let's just say it didn't win popularity contests. You doze for a while under the stars, dreaming of hot baths and roast dinners. You're startled awake by the crunch of footsteps. a shadowed figure with a bicycle. No headlights, just a small flick of fingers in the agreed signal. 3 taps on the frame. Tap, tap, tap. You respond with your own. Tap. Pause. Tap, tap. He nods and tosses you a small cloth-wrapped bundle. Inside, a baguette. Still warm. Your fingers find the hollowed center. Inside, another blank envelope. This one's for London. You'll write tonight, tiny marks with your homemade starch ink, and pass it to the next courier in 3 days. You can't make mistakes. 1 drop too thick, and it smears. Too light, and it vanishes. You remember the training manual. Patience and a steady hand, preferably not trembling with fear. Later, in the attic of an abandoned bakery, you light a stub of candle and write, "It's muscle memory now." The message forms in your head. Supply drop confirmed, resistance cell intact, bridge sabotage scheduled. You dip a sharpened stick into a ceramic dish of potato water, cooled and strained to the right viscosity. You write in long loops, pressing just enough to score the paper, but not tear it. Then you blow gently, watching it dry, invisible, as if it were never there. You tuck the page into the lining of your coat, folding it once, twice. You'll trade it tomorrow for intel on German troop movement. But for now, you lie back on the dusty floorboards and let the warmth from your chest slowly coax the faintest traces of ink to life. A ghost on the page, a whisper across enemy lines, and you, curled in the dark with potato stains on your cuffs, are the messenger that history will almost forget. Almost. You wake before dawn, the light barely a suggestion through broken roof tiles above. Your fingers ache from the cold, but you can still feel the starch ink page tucked in your coat. If you're caught, the page will look blank, just a sad little letter home from no one, to no one. But you know better. That single sheet could mean a bridge blown, or a train derailed, or, if you're very lucky, the Germans missing their next batch of fuel. You shift onto your side, careful not to knock over the candle stub you'd used the night before. Its wax has puddled into a bottle cap, your makeshift holder. There's a rustle near the door, not footsteps, just the wind bullying a loose shutter. You breathe again. You've developed the habit of inhaling every sound like it might kill you. Downstairs, in what used to be the bakery's front room, you find the flour bin, mostly empty. But it has its uses. You take a handful and rub it on your hands to mask the scent of potato starch. Old superstition, perhaps. But you've seen dogs sniff out ink before, or at least you've heard they can. Historians still argue whether Nazi sniffer dogs were trained well enough to catch starch-based invisible inks. Some say it was just a rumor. Others say it cost lives. Breakfast is a slice of stale bread and half a carrot. You chew slowly, ears always tuned for engine noises in the distance. You need to move soon. Your next stop is a village called Saint-Benoît, where a woman sells spices at the back of a butcher shop. Her spice rack hides a trap door, and under that, a tunnel that leads to a safe house. She'll take your page, heat it near the stove, then add a second layer of potato ink instructions, perhaps a map, perhaps a reply, and pass it along. But how does this all work? You wonder. Not for the first time. How does a vegetable become a weapon? It's all about enzymes. Potato juice contains catechol oxidase, a mouthful of a name for an enzyme that reacts with oxygen. When exposed to air and heat, like the warmth of your chest or the flicker of a match, the compounds in the starch oxidize slightly and darken, often to a faint brown or yellowish tinge. Not enough to catch a guard's eye, but enough for someone who knows what to look for. Of course, This wasn't exactly new. Invisible ink had been around for centuries. The ancient Greeks used milk. The Romans wrote secret love notes with vinegar. During the American Revolution, lemon juice was the ink of choice, until British soldiers realized they could hold suspected letters near a flame and reveal their secrets. Fast forward to the 1940s, and the stakes were higher. But the ingredients? Still mostly pantry staples. You leave the bakery before the village stirs. Roads are dangerous now. Too open. Too exposed. You stick to side paths, weaving between trees and hedges, the bundle pressed to your ribs. You keep moving, counting steps out of habit. 100 paces between turns, 500 before the road curves near the river. You repeat it in your head like a song, or a prayer, and along the way, you remember your first experiment with potato ink back in England. You'd carved your message onto a slice of raw potato, "Send biscuits," just to see if anyone would notice. They did. The ink came out too thick, the writing too bold. It looked like the potato had wept brown tears all over the paper. You got kitchen duty for a week. Your hands smelled like onions the entire time, and you never did get those biscuits. Eventually, your path brings you to a stone bridge. Beneath it, the trickle of a stream, and tucked into a gap in the masonry, a small metal tin with a green ribbon tied around it. Code for safe to approach. You open it. Inside, a map, 2 names, and a note written in what looks like ink. But when you sniff it, it's clearly vinegar-based. You raise an eyebrow. Someone's getting fancy. You replace the tin and move on. Wondering briefly how many messages have passed hands in this way. Dozens? Hundreds? Some carried by children with bread baskets. Others sewn into hat brims. One agent you trained with insisted on writing messages between the folds of a handkerchief, claiming the starch in the cloth made the ink pop better. He also claimed to be descended from Sir Isaac Newton, which you strongly doubt, considering he once mistook the latrine bucket for a tea kettle. It's midday when you reach Saint-Benoît. The butcher's shop smells exactly like you'd expect. Meat, salt, and maybe something pickled that's gone a little rogue. Madame Rousseau, the spice seller, gives you a brief nod. No words, just a glance at the counter where a folded napkin sits. You leave your envelope underneath, pick up the napkin, and walk out as if you'd forgotten your mustard. 10 minutes later, you're in a shed behind the shop, pretending to inspect rabbit cages. The tunnel beneath the trapdoor smells of damp earth and something vaguely fungal. You crouch in the dark, listening as the message is decoded above your head. You know the process. Madame Rousseau will gently warm the envelope near the stove, never too close. Or the ink blisters, and the starch will reveal itself. If all goes well, she'll add her own note in the margins, using the same technique, a second layer of invisible ink nestled within yours. To the untrained eye, still just a blank page. To the resistance, a living, breathing chain of information. You think of the lab back in London where they cooked this up, somewhere in the basement of a boring-looking building, filled with nerdy men in lab coats pouring potato water into vials. Historians still debate which of them first realized potatoes worked better than milk. The leading theory involves an overcooked lunch and a clumsy intern. As with many great discoveries, it began with a mess, a whisper at the trap door, 2 taps. You climb up and accept a fresh envelope. Still warm, still blank, no words spoken, no goodbyes. Just one potato to another, passing on the story. The envelope you've just received is warm against your fingers, freshly handled, freshly inked, and still blank to the casual glance. There's something comforting about the ritual of it, as if passing invisible secrets written with potato juice is somehow less dangerous than it really is. But you know better. The walls of German prisons are full of people who bet on comfort and lost. You move quickly, tucking the envelope into a secret flap sewn inside your jacket lining, It rests against your skin, where your body heat will start revealing faint impressions of letters by the time it reaches its destination. It's not a flaw in the system, it's a feature. The agent on the receiving end knows to check for those hints. Then warm it carefully over a lamp to reveal the full message. Still, it makes your heart beat a little faster. Every degree of heat adds risk. Too little, and nothing appears. Too much, and your secrets turn into a scorched smear of betrayal. You leave Saint Benoit without ceremony. You don't look back. Rule number 1, no sentiment. Rule number 2, don't stay anywhere longer than it takes to boil an egg, unless you're the egg. Your next stop is a church on the edge of a pine forest, halfway to Lyon. The vicar there is supposedly deaf in one ear and hard of trusting in both. But he owes London a favor. Your job is to deliver the message and not get mistaken for a looter, a saboteur, or worse, a fool. Resistance networks weren't built on faith. They were built on doubt. You pass a field of potatoes, not metaphorical ones, but real, actual fields, and it makes you smirk a little. Somewhere out there, a German patrol is stomping through tubers, unaware that the brown lumps under their boots are also quietly powering an underground communication system. Farmers feed the front lines. Spies just squeeze them. In London, they called this the potato papers system. It sounded quaint, even silly. But the Office of Scientific Research and the Special Operations Executive took it very seriously. A few drops of potato starch, mixed with a catalyst, maybe iodine, maybe vinegar, could carry anything from battle plans to escape routes. What made it brilliant was its normalcy. It wasn't radioactive. It didn't require exotic ingredients. Anyone could use it. Anyone did. Housewives, children, priests. The war blurred the lines between soldier and civilian. And if you were caught, the paper looked blank. Maybe you were writing a grocery list. Maybe it was a love letter. Maybe you were just a sentimental idiot who carried empty pages through Nazi territory for no good reason. Historians still argue whether this method was more effective than coded telegrams or microfilm. The latter were faster, sure, but easier to intercept. Potato ink was stubborn. It didn't yield its secrets until it felt safe. Like a cat in a thunderstorm. At the edge of the forest, you slow your pace. The trees stretch like sentinels, watching. You're no longer sure if your heartbeat is loud or if the woods are just that quiet. Somewhere nearby, a stream murmurs. You think about boiling potatoes in the safety of a warm kitchen, back when your biggest problem was whether your socks matched. You pass a marker carved into a tree, 3 vertical lines just an inch long, code for safe route. You move ahead 20 paces. Another mark, this one half scratched out, meaning watch for tails. Someone's been here recently, someone cautious. You press on anyway. There's a thin line between brave and cooked. You reach the church around dusk. A modest stone building, hunched between the trees as if trying to hide. Inside, it smells like candle wax and dust. The vicar is sweeping the floor, slowly, methodically. He looks up but says nothing. Just gives you a brief nod and gestures to a row of prayer books along the back pew. You know the drill. 3rd book from the left, hollowed out in the middle, a perfect fit for the envelope. You slip it in, close the book, and sit for a moment, pretending to pray. You whisper something that's half thank you, half oh no. The vicar clears his throat. You rise to leave, but he holds up a hand, reaches into his cassock and produces another envelope. Blank, of course. This one is for the agent in Grenoble. You're not just a messenger anymore. You're a relay point. And here's where it gets complicated. Because while potato ink is subtle, it's not indestructible. Rain can smudge it. Sweat can dissolve it. One nervous twitch and your own body betrays you. You have to carry the page close to your skin for warmth, but not too close. Moisture ruins everything. One agent in the Netherlands used a wax paper sleeve. Another carried hers in an empty lipstick tube. You once met a man who stored his under his toupee. He also claimed he'd invented the technique using turnip juice. He was a liar, but the hairpiece was impressively stable. You tuck the new envelope away and leave. Outside, night has deepened. The stars are sharp as knives. You walk quietly, retracing your steps toward the fork in the trail. Then a rustle behind you. You freeze. Just a bird? A fox? Or something less wild? Your fingers twitch toward your coat. Not for a weapon. You don't carry one. Just for the envelope, the page, the truth you're holding, but no one appears. No footsteps, no voices. You move faster now, heart drumming. You think of the ink, drying invisibly against your chest. You imagine the letters appearing, curling into view like ghosts. The message is not for you to read. It's just for you to carry. Funny how something so important can look like nothing. Just a potato, after all. Just paper. The road to Grenoble is longer than it looks on any map, and more dangerous than it seems in any story. You move through it like a ghost, keeping to woods and winding trails, avoiding every well-worn path like it carries plague. Every turn in the road is a coin toss, safe passage or sudden arrest, and through it all, you carry an envelope that looks empty. Inside, a message written in dried potato juice, utterly invisible, unless coaxed to life by just the right heat. The thing about potato-based ink is that it demands patience. It's not flashy. It doesn't glow under ultraviolet light like some chemical creations of the Cold War. It just waits. Like you, silent, still suspicious of attention. You wonder if that's why they chose it. Maybe the potato was the perfect metaphor for a spy, unremarkable on the outside, bursting with potential inside. But the Germans, they were catching on, not to potatoes specifically. Maybe. But to the idea that blank paper could be anything but. By 1943, they'd begun ramping up their detection techniques. Border guards were taught to scan letters against candlelight. Any hint of discoloration, any suspicious wrinkle or watermark, and your secret was soup. That's why the Allies responded not with force, but with chemistry. Invisible ink wasn't a one-sided game. It was an arms race of absurd proportions. For every potato-based recipe, the Germans developed detection reagents, sometimes heat, sometimes chemical sprays, and for every one of those, British scientists responded with a new twist: thicker starch, or onion juice, or milk with just enough sugar content to mask oxidation. The Chemical Intelligence Section, yes, that was a real department, met weekly to test new formulas. Picture it. A room full of war-hardened scientists carefully dipping toothpicks into mashed turnip water, arguing about drying time. Historians still argue whether this cat-and-mouse game had a clear winner. Some say the Germans developed a machine sensitive enough to detect all natural starches. Others insist that, by the time they did, the Allies had already moved on to synthetic compounds and microdots. One thing's certain. During the middle years of the war, potato ink held the line. As you reach a sleepy crossroads village, you pause in the shadow of a closed bakery. You crouch beside a crumbling wall, adjusting the inner lining of your coat where the letter rests. It's still warm, which is both good and risky. The faintest trace of script might already be forming. There's no way to know for sure, not unless you break the seal and hold it to a flame. And if you do that, you break the chain. You're the messenger. You don't get to read what you carry. Still, curiosity is a parasite, and it gnaws at you now. What did the vicar write? A list of names? Coordinates? A coded phrase that makes no sense to you, but could send men moving in the night with explosives hidden in crates of onions? You shift the letter a little deeper into the lining, careful not to smudge it. Your sweat has already turned one corner soft. You make a note to air it out when you reach your next stop. You travel by night now, mostly. The roads are watched, and even shadows have ears. At a stream, you pause to rinse your hands and splash your face. The cold bites your skin, You think about the potato ink again, how it clings to fibers so subtly that even a wet paper can seem untouched. But water is tricky. Too much moisture too early, and the message might rise when no one's looking. A patrol with a kerosene lamp and a curious streak could reveal everything. So you press on. The next contact is a school teacher, a wiry woman who runs a one-room classroom in a stone building that smells like chalk, rainwater, and ink. Real ink, the kind students spill. But after hours, she lights a fire in the hearth and brews tea while resistance fighters slip in with blank sheets and tired eyes. When you arrive, she's dusting erasers, not metaphorically, actual erasers. You offer a cough, just loud enough to echo. "Late for class?" she says without looking up. You smile and shake your head. "I forgot my homework." She gives you a once-over, then nods to a seat near the back. You take it? This part is always strange. Handing over something so small, so ordinary, and knowing it could determine whether a factory explodes or a safe house survives the week. She doesn't ask questions, just slides the envelope from your palm with the quiet grace of someone who's done this 100 times. Then she opens a drawer, pulls out a ceramic mug, and pours a thick brown liquid into it. Not tea, potato starch. Warmed just enough to loosen the fibers. She uses a brush to test the edge of the envelope on a scrap page, just to confirm the ink took. Within seconds, a few faint lines appear, jagged, thin, but readable. The message lives. You watch as she nods, then tucks the page into a new envelope and seals it with wax. Not red, too noticeable, but plain brown, the same color as the envelope itself. Then she adds her own note, 3 words written in fresh starch. "Ready for snow." You don't ask what it means. You never do. She hands you the new letter and smiles. "Nice penmanship," she says. You chuckle. "Must be the potato." You leave the schoolhouse and melt back into the night. You're just a shadow again, carrying your starch-stained secret into the arms of history, and all across Europe. Agents do the same. Letters pass hands in alleyways. Pages are dried over stovetops. Potatoes are sliced and pressed into ink, their juice carrying the weight of rebellions and revolutions. Funny, isn't it? You always thought war would smell like smoke and gunpowder. Turns out, sometimes, it smells faintly like dinner. You're not sure what day it is anymore. Time slips when you're on the move, carrying blank pages and sleeping in barns. Your legs ache from the walking, and the ink, if you can still call it that, has warmed and cooled against your chest so many times, it's probably started whispering its secrets to your shirt. You pause under a tree to rest, checking the horizon. No smoke, no headlights, no dogs. So far, so good. But you know better than to get comfortable, especially now. The Germans have begun inspecting more aggressively. You've heard stories filtering in from other couriers, letters taken, pages burned, men arrested over paper that looked too new. One guy was detained for an hour because his stationery was too nice. They assumed it had to be spycraft. Turns out, it was just a very enthusiastic pen pal. The truth is, they're catching on. Not to potatoes exactly, but to the science behind them. Ink that can vanish, paper that looks innocent until it doesn't. And so they've begun adapting. You've heard of the ink detection teams. Soldiers trained to recognize the faintest signs. They're not chemists, just men with heat lamps, suspicious minds, and too much time. They'll steam a letter until it curls like a leaf. They'll sniff it, rub it, shine light through it, and if anything appears, even a smudge, they'll call for backup. Which is why, back in London, your handlers taught you to sweat properly. Yes, really. You were made to jog laps, then write secret messages afterward, with your skin still dewy. Because potato ink reacts to warmth and skin oils. Too much sweat, and it blooms. Not enough, and it stays hidden too long. The idea was to teach your body to become the perfect thermostat, One poor agent, let's call him Jenkins, sweated so much his message came through early. He handed off a damp, half-revealed letter to a contact in Belgium, and the guy nearly had a stroke reading half a sentence out of context. It said something like, "Railcar explosives under," and then cut off. The Belgian blew up a goat shed by accident. No one was injured, except the goat, which developed a lifelong fear of paper. You're not Jenkins. You've learned to manage it. Still, the balance is delicate. Potato ink relies on natural oxidation, heat, moisture, air. But if those things happen too soon, disaster. To make matters worse, the Germans have started experimenting with chemical sprays, vinegar mist, iodine solutions, even urine, though that one's still debated. Historians can't agree if that particular method was real, or just a very rude rumor started by the British. But you've seen the real stuff. A patrol once sprayed a friend's letter with lemon juice and held it near a flame. The message screamed onto the page. He was taken. You never saw him again. That's why you've started double layering your pages. Step 1, starch ink for the message. Step 2, light coat of sugar water over the top. It sounds insane, but it forms a sort of film that delays heat reaction, a sticky time capsule. In training, they called it the caramel trick. It only works if the paper's folded tight, and only if you don't sweat too much. But it saved more than a few lives. You pass a farmhouse and wave at an old woman churning butter. She doesn't wave back. Good. That's the sign. If she ignores you, it's safe. You duck behind the barn and slide open a hidden panel near the pig trough. Inside, a wooden box. You place the letter inside, then pull out a fresh envelope tucked beneath a sack of feed. You don't read it, of course, but you hold it to your chest a moment, just long enough to warm the page. It's an odd ritual, like feeding a baby bird. You have to give it just enough life to survive the trip. As you walk on, you remember something from training, and experiment with different starch sources. One instructor insisted sweet potatoes yielded stronger contrast, while another swore by parsnips. One bold chemist tried banana peel extract, but the smell gave her away at a checkpoint. Her code name was Tropical Failure. She eventually transferred to weather balloons. The Germans, meanwhile, kept adapting. They began measuring envelope thickness. They weighed blank sheets with scales sensitive to fractions of grams, looking for ink buildup. They created paper sniffers, looking for residue. And yes, they had dogs. Rumor says they trained a group of German shepherds to sit if they smelled starch. Historians still argue whether the dogs were effective or just enthusiastic about treats. One report claimed a dog exposed 5 fake letters in a single day. Another said a dog ate the message to avoid detection. Allied agents like you had to keep innovating. Some used invisible ink to write over real messages, layering recipes or poems with sabotage coordinates. Others wrote around the edges of newspapers, using starch to hide directions inside crossword puzzles. One creative soul penned opera reviews with key letters darkened by citrus juice. The message, once decoded, read, "Send more biscuits." You admired that one. Clear priorities. Tonight, you sleep under a cart near the edge of a vineyard. The earth smells like old wine and manure. You wrap yourself in a tarp and hold your latest letter close, letting your breath warm it slightly. Just enough. Somewhere down the road, another agent is doing the same. Maybe they're holding a page you wrote days ago, hoping it hasn't blurred in the rain. Maybe they're wondering if the ink will ever appear. And in labs deep in the English countryside, scientists still toy with potatoes, testing drying times, measuring paper textures, arguing over boiling versus roasting. One swears by steaming, another adds salt. A third insists a quick soak in vinegar before writing gives better contrast. No one agrees, but no one gives up either, because the war is still on. And the page you carry still looks blank. But it isn't. It's brimming with noise, quiet, invisible, powerful, just waiting to be heard. You wake up to a soft thud. Not the gunshot kind, more like a fat pear dropping from a tree. You peek from under the tarp, eyes adjusting to the haze of early morning. A small boy is standing there, holding a chicken upside down and chewing a piece of straw like he's the mayor of the barn. He doesn't say anything, just looks at you, shrugs, and walks off. You figure that's a good sign. Your journey today will take you across 3 villages, 2 checkpoints, and 1 deeply suspicious goat who always tries to eat your satchel. The ink you carry this time is fresh, boiled just the night before, dried into a paste, and rubbed into the edge of your shirt collar for good luck. This batch is special. You helped test it yourself during training. It's mixed not just with potato starch, but also with crushed aspirin and a few drops of onion extract. Why? Because someone discovered, accidentally, as most good things are, that aspirin helps preserve the invisible ink's consistency in humid conditions. The onion? That was for flavor. Kidding. It actually balances the pH, apparently. Science is weird like that. Anyway, you're trusting this batch with a message that could reroute an entire munitions train. You walk steadily, blending in, whistle a little tune. Try not to look like you're holding military-grade mashed potatoes in your coat lining. Halfway through the second village, you get stopped. 2 German soldiers, young, bored. One of them has mustard on his sleeve. The other is already rolling a cigarette and giving you the kind of look that says, "I'm going to ask stupid questions, and you will answer them slowly. You're used to this." He gestures to your satchel. You hand it over. Inside, a loaf of bread, a folded newspaper, a blank piece of stationery. Exactly what they expect from a traveling vendor. The other soldier flips the page over once, twice, holds it to the light. Nothing. But then he sniffs it. You feel your stomach lurch. See, the new formula, aspirin and onion, has a faint scent. Not strong. But if you've been sniffing potatoes all morning like some kind of ink bloodhound, you might catch it. He furrows his brow, says something to the other soldier. You smile and offer him the bread. It's stale, but warm. He takes it, shrugs, and waves you through. You walk, slowly, casually, your heart punching the inside of your ribs like it's trying to defect. You only relax once you pass the goat. It tries to eat your sleeve again. You let it. Better that than your documents. As you continue down the road, the science spins through your head. Potato starch contains amylose, the molecule that makes the ink work its disappearing act. When you write with it, it dries almost clear. Only under certain heat or chemical exposure does it oxidize into a visible brown. But it's not just about writing. It's about how you write. Pressure matters. Too hard, and you leave an indentation. Too light, and the ink doesn't transfer. You learned to calibrate your strokes like a painter. Each letter a whisper. Back in the labs, they tested ink formulas on hundreds of paper types. Rice, linen, even cigarette rolling paper. Some held the ink too long. Some made it appear too fast. One scientist spent 3 weeks developing a slow burn blend designed to reveal only when held over a candle for exactly 11 seconds. She nearly burned her eyebrows off. Twice? Another fringe scientist experimented with writing on edible paper, thinking you could swallow your message if captured. Turns out stomach acid reveals the ink quite effectively. The message once read, "Abort mission," which felt wildly appropriate. Historians still argue whether these methods were practical or just imaginative desperation. Some insist the potato ink was only used for decoys. Others believe entire networks were run using nothing else. You've seen the truth. You've watched invisible instructions change the path of entire convoys. You've seen a blank postcard redirect a resistance raid just hours before German reinforcements arrived. You've seen inkless pages cause real explosions. And now, you carry that power in your bag. You reach the third village by dusk. This one's quiet. Too quiet. Maybe. But there's no checkpoint. Just a woman selling beets in a wheelbarrow. You give the password, 2 taps on the side of the cart, one on the edge of your boot. She nods and lifts the false bottom of her beet bin. You slide your letter beneath the root vegetables. It's safe now. Before you leave, she hands you a carrot. You think it's a gift. Turns out, the carrot is hollow. Inside is your next message. Folded impossibly small. Probably written with even weirder ink. Maybe cabbage this time. Or diluted honey. The science has gotten stranger. You've heard of agents using milk, vinegar, even wine reductions to write their messages. One bold American tried cola syrup. The message only appeared if you licked the page. Not ideal in a desert or during flu season. There's even a rumor, probably fake, that someone used octopus ink. The page turned black under heat, revealing white letters, like reverse Harry Potter. Whether it's true or not, one thing remains constant. The battle isn't just in the trenches or the air. It's in the molecules, the fibers, the quiet chemistry of resistance. As you leave the village, carrot tucked safely in your bag. You think about the scientists who made all this possible. Most weren't soldiers. Some weren't even qualified. Just tinkerers, gardeners, chemists who believed that a potato could become a weapon. And they were right. Because you're carrying more than a message. You're carrying proof that ordinary things, starch, sweat, paper, can change history. Even if no one else sees it, even if it disappears, you don't sleep much that night. Something about carrying secrets inside vegetables makes rest feel like a luxury you haven't earned yet. Instead, you stare at the rafters of a low farmhouse ceiling, listening to the occasional snap of wood and the far-off bark of a dog. Beneath the floorboards, there's a cache of forged passports and a bicycle that squeaks when no one's near it. The house smells like hay and soup and a little bit like conspiracy. Come morning, you're back on the road with the hollow carrot nestled in your coat. The air is brisk, the sky overcast, and you're vaguely aware that this might be the only moment today when you're not actively lying. The destination is a post office 3 towns over, operated by a man with suspiciously clean fingernails and a tendency to overwater his plants. His role? Officially, he's there to organize stamp collections. Unofficially, he processes code hidden in invisible ink. The stamps themselves have been known to carry micro-messages, scrawled in potato ink and revealed only with a particular iodine blend. Stamp collectors of the world, eat your heart out. You arrive just before lunch. The clerk greets you with a nod. He looks at your coat, your boots, then your face, his eyes lingering just long enough to let you know. Yes, he sees you. Yes, he knows what you're holding. You hand him a postcard, a decoy, obviously, featuring a windmill and a happy cow. Nothing screams nothing to see here like cheerful livestock. Then comes the handoff. You accidentally drop a second envelope onto the counter. It's blank, slightly crumpled, smells faintly of soup and carrots. He picks it up with exaggerated care and slips it beneath a stack of telegrams. And just like that, your part is done. But you're curious, so you linger. He invites you behind the counter for tea, of course, which is actually chicory root boiled in a metal pot and passed off as government-issue warmth. You take a sip and feel your eyebrows try to retreat from your face. It's earthy. While he tidies up, you watch him retrieve the envelope and perform the first test. He holds it above a desk lamp. Nothing. Then he lightly dabs one corner with a solution from a dropper bottle. Still nothing visible to you. But then again, you're not the expert. Carrot juice this time? He asks casually, without looking up. Close, you reply. With a little aspirin, he nods, like he's heard of stranger things. And he has... Last month, someone sent a message on laundry starch, which turned into a legible script only when ironed with just the right amount of steam. Not too much, or the ink ran like mascara in a monsoon. The science behind these revelations is equal parts genius and guesswork. Many formulas are based on pH levels and oxidation reactions. chemical shifts triggered by temperature, acid, or exposure to UV light. A popular technique involved thymolphthalin, a compound that turns blue in alkaline conditions. Add baking soda, and boom, secret message. But not all secrets want to be found. Historians still argue whether these chemical tricks were more psychological than practical. Some claim it was less about the ink and more about the mystique, the idea that the enemy was surrounded by phantoms and invisible messages, a sort of chemical ghost story, unfolding on sheets of blank paper. And then there were the accidents. Like the time a resistance courier accidentally used the wrong dilution and ended up with a message that appeared before delivery. She panicked, folded the letter into origami, and hid it inside a ham sandwich. The recipient never got the message. But he did get lunch. Back in the post office, the clerk has finished analyzing your envelope. He gives you a look, a small nod, paired with a smile so slight it could be mistaken for indigestion. Message received, all systems go. You sip the rest of your tea because you're polite, not because you like it. Then you step back onto the cobbled street, blending once more into the smear of daily life. As you walk, you think about how this network operates, not just through ink and chemistry, but through trust. Every link in the chain is a person who could, under the right pressure, break. That's why the ink matters. It's not just about being sneaky, it's about being unprovable. If they search your bag and find a blank piece of paper, there's nothing to confess, nothing to decode, nothing to burn, just paper. You'll say, for writing poems, or lists, or letters to nobody. Which is true, in a way. You've written to nobody more times than you can count. Your next stop is an old train yard, rusted tracks, creaking metal, and a thin layer of dust that smells like cold iron and abandonment. You're meeting someone, your contact for extraction. Not the fleeing the country kind, the getting you back to your hiding hole without being caught by fascists kind. He's late. You wait beside an overturned wheelbarrow, pretending to be deeply invested in tying your boot. And that's when you hear it, a hiss. Then, footsteps. Your contact appears from beneath a parked coal car, brushing soot off his sleeves and offering you an apple. It's not a snack. You crack it open. Inside the hollowed core, a matchbox with a folded note inside, potato ink. Again. But this time, the message isn't yours. It's for you, and it simply reads, they know. Move now. No signature, no flair, just survival in 12 letters. You don't ask questions. The contact gestures, and you both vanish into the shadows behind the platform. No time to retrieve the rest of the network. No time to send warnings. You move, fast, through narrow alleys, through dusty barns, over fences, across riverbeds where the cold bites like a warning. Later, safe in a root cellar beneath a closed-down mill, you read the message again. Still faint, still brown around the edges, still real. The war doesn't pause for the poetic. It doesn't wait for clever ink to dry. And tonight, it nearly outran you. Still, you're alive, and your hands are stained faintly with potato. You'll take it. By now, the smell of starch and ink is practically part of your DNA. You lie on your back in that damp cellar, your breath slowing, your ears tuned to the creaks and groans of the abandoned mill overhead. Water drips rhythmically into a rusted bucket. Somewhere above, rats argue over who gets the last crumb. You're warm, sort of, wrapped in a wool blanket that smells like someone else's regrets. Your fingers still carry a trace of potato. You didn't wash them, maybe out of superstition, maybe because some part of you thinks you might need to write another message before dawn. You're wrong, of course. This night won't be about messages, it'll be about waiting. And while you wait, your mind drifts. Because in a strange way, hiding feels like remembering. You remember the lab in Britain where much of this invisible ink sorcery started? Station 9, tucked behind a nondescript mansion in a quiet village, where men in white coats giggled like schoolboys over test tubes of lemon juice and arsenic, Yes, arsenic. Not for poison. Well, sometimes for poison, but often to create ink that could only be revealed with a special reagent. The science was always 1 part real chemistry and 2 parts, we hope this doesn't kill anyone. They tested things like milk, urine, saliva, and even soap residue. Basically, if a human body produced it or touched it, someone tried to write a secret message with it. In fact, one particularly famous method involved using sweat. Actual sweat. Agents were instructed to exercise, collect their perspiration, and use it as invisible ink. The message would reveal itself under heat, like a slow ghost emerging from paper purgatory. Historians still argue whether this was ever truly effective or just another bizarre chapter in the "try everything once" wartime manual. But at least one field operative is known to have composed an entire poem using nothing but armpit-based ink. It wasn't a great poem, but it rhymed, "In your hiding spot." You trace imaginary words onto the floor with a soot-covered finger. Old habits die hard. You imagine sending a message that says, "Still here, still pretending to be furniture." You think back to your training, where someone once told you the perfect invisible message is one you can deny until the grave. Something innocent, boring, even. Because the moment the Gestapo suspects your grocery list is actually a coded call to arms, you're not just playing spy games anymore, you're playing for your life. And that brings you to one of the oddest inventions of the whole invisible ink saga. Disappearing messages inside reappearing books. Let me explain. You might have seen a book where someone cut out the center pages to hide something. A key, a gun, a particularly offensive sandwich. But some wartime agents went further. They'd inscribe messages into the fibers of the book's spine, using ultra-thin brushes and carefully diluted ink, so that when you bent the book open just the right way, the message shimmered into view for a moment, then vanished again. One such book? A popular gardening manual, chosen because absolutely no Nazi ever suspected tomato-growing tips of sedition. That's the rule. Hide messages where no one would bother to look. Hide them in boredom, which leads us to one of the Resistance's favorite covers. Recipes. Yes, recipes. Whole spy networks existed in occupied France, where operatives would exchange what looked like quaint instructions for lentil stew or apple tart. But if you substituted certain ingredients with symbols, if 1 teaspoon thyme actually meant meet at the bridge at midnight, then dinner just became dangerously subversive. One recipe reportedly read, boil potatoes until soft, mash thoroughly, stir in milk until smooth. If lumpy, you've gone too far. Sounds cozy, right? Except milk was a code word for explosives. And too far meant you've been compromised. No one ever ate the stew. And speaking of going too far, the British intelligence services once tried to develop a paper that would destroy itself if someone opened it improperly. Imagine origami with a death wish. It worked, sort of. The idea was to print a message on chemically treated paper that would disintegrate or combust if exposed to air, light, or tampering. In practice, it either destroyed itself before anyone read it or did nothing at all. Still, you admire the optimism. Historians remain divided on whether any of those self-destructing messages were ever successfully delivered. Some say it was all just theoretical, science fiction in a trench coat. Others believe at least one key operation relied on it. And if that's true, it means somewhere out there, a crumpled paper, reduced to ash, once whispered the fate of a town. You roll over, blanket slipping from your shoulder, as the wind outside howls like it just learned your name. Your contact said he'd return by morning. So you wait, teeth chattering slightly, thoughts drifting like fog. When the door finally creaks open, it's not who you expect. It's a woman in a red scarf and thick gloves, carrying a satchel and humming something off-key. She doesn't ask your name. She just says the password. The carrots are sweet this year. You reply automatically, only when boiled under moonlight. She nods and unzips her bag. Inside, a typewriter, a small bottle of starch-based developer solution, and a crumpled note with your next assignment. You're back in the game. She shows you a blank page and points to a small ink blot near the bottom. Then she applies heat. A few seconds later, the message appears. Just 6 words. He's turned. Eliminate him. No traces. Your breath catches. Elimination wasn't part of the deal. You deliver messages. You smuggle intel. You make tea taste like lies. But killing? She says nothing. Just leaves the typewriter and vanishes into the wind. Now you're alone, staring at the paper and wondering who he is. A traitor? A friend? Someone who once wrote you a joke in lemon juice across a chessboard? The potato ink doesn't say. You fold the message, tuck it into the satchel, and start mentally preparing for the longest walk of your life. Because the truth is, sometimes the most invisible ink is guilt. You're walking before dawn, boots pressing softly into the dewy grass, each step a quiet betrayal of the stillness around you. It's not a march. It's not even a mission yet. It's more like wandering with a ghost of purpose, led by a sentence written in ink that didn't exist a moment ago. Your satchel swings lightly at your side. Inside, the note. He's turned. Eliminate him, no traces. You don't even know his name yet. Or maybe you do. Maybe you've suspected all along. That's the real curse of this war. You never stop watching people like their door's about to open in the wrong direction. The air smells like wet soil and wood smoke. Somewhere, a rooster makes a half-hearted attempt at a crow, as if even the livestock is exhausted by espionage. You reach the rendezvous point. A weathered stone bench, moss-covered and cracked, tucked behind the chapel ruins. There's a rusted spigot nearby, and you take a moment to rinse your hands. The water's freezing, but it brings a kind of clarity, because what you're about to do can't be undone. But just as you steady yourself, you see a movement, a shadow emerging from behind the chapel wall. It's him. His name is Claude. You know it now, suddenly and clearly. Claude, the courier from Lyon, the one who used to sneak children across the border hidden in barrels of sauerkraut, the one who laughed too loudly, even during air raids, the one who taught you how to make invisible ink from nothing but baking soda and laundry water. He doesn't see you yet. You reach into your coat for the message, but your fingers brush something else, a tiny phial of starch solution and a crumpled recipe card, your fallback method of exposure. You hesitate, because even now, you don't really know if the message is true. The woman in the red scarf could be wrong, or compromised, or worse, testing you. Historians still argue whether agents were ever deliberately fed false execution orders just to see if they'd obey. Some say it's a myth, too cruel, too chaotic. Others believe it happened more than once. A loyalty test disguised as murder, invisible ink. But the message is carved directly into your conscience. You take out the note again, holding it to the dawn's light. The words are still there, as sharp as before, but something about them feels different now. Colder, like they've taken on a life of their own. Claude spots you, smiles, starts walking over, hands tucked into his coat. That same lopsided grin as always. You remember something he once said during training. The best code is something you'd never forget. The second best is something you'll never forgive. He reaches you and says, "I brought jam." No one suspects jam. You don't answer. You stare. And he notices. His smile falters. "What's wrong?" he asks, more softly now. You say, "You tell me," and he knows. His eyes drop, just for a second. But in that second, everything falls into place. He doesn't run, doesn't deny it, just sighs, and sits on the bench like someone preparing for a haircut. Not an execution. There's a pause. Then he speaks again, not to you exactly, but to the sky. "They caught my sister, threatened her kid. I gave them one drop, just one. A name, a wrong one. Your mouth is dry. The wind picks up, rattling the chapel windows like bones in a jar. You gave them a decoy?" you ask. He nods. And the name? He shrugs. Didn't matter. It bounced back. No one got hurt, except now someone's trying to hurt me. He's right. You don't know where the message came from. You don't know who's lying anymore. And you wonder if that's the point. Maybe this isn't about Claude. Maybe this is about breaking you. You hand him the note. He reads it, smiles bitterly. Potato ink? He says. You nod. Standard issue. He tears the note in half and lets the pieces flutter into a puddle. I'll disappear, he says. No need for blood. Just let me vanish. It's a solution. A quiet one. And suddenly you realize this is how many spies survived. Not with guns, or fists, or clever gadgets, but with permission to vanish. To stop being useful before they became dangerous. You help him stand. He presses a small envelope into your hand. Message for the baker, he says. Tell her the eggs are safe. And then he's gone. You sit for a long time, staring at the puddle, until the paper has dissolved completely. Your mind drifts again to the stranger inventions used in this war. Like the microdot. A single photograph shrunk down so small it could be hidden inside a period at the end of a sentence. Whole blueprints, family photos, or maps embedded in what looked like harmless punctuation. It was developed by both the Allies and the Axis, and no one quite agrees who started it first. Historians argue endlessly. Was it the Germans with their precise engineering, or the British with their fondness for sly tricks? What's not debated is the impact. A single microdot could contain more information than a folder full of typed pages, and it traveled in plain sight, inside books, love letters, or even newspaper headlines. One agent allegedly smuggled a microdot inside the printed eye of a crossword puzzle owl, because yes, even owls have secrets. The genius of the microdot was the same as the potato ink. Hide what's valuable in what's mundane. Assume your enemy is too busy looking for monsters to notice mice. You tuck the baker's message into your satchel, unsure if it's real or symbolic or another kind of test. And as you head down the hillside path, toward the sleepy village, the road begins to glow with the soft gold of sunrise. The kind of sunrise that makes everything look like a promise. Even the war. Even you! You reach the village just as the bells are ringing. A hollow, half-hearted clang that sounds more like a warning than a welcome. The baker's shop sits near the end of the cobbled street. Warm light flickering behind gingham curtains. A painted sign above the door that reads, simply pain, bread. But for you, it might as well read, password. Inside, the scent of yeast and cinnamon slinks up your nose like a mischievous ghost. Your stomach growls at the betrayal, because while you've been dodging death and decoding starch messages, your body has remembered that it is tragically human and hungry. Madame Roux is behind the counter. You recognize her. Everyone does. Plump, gray-haired, and always wearing a pink kerchief that never quite matches her dress. She smiles when she sees you. Well, she says, brushing flour from her palms. You've got the look of someone who's read too many sad letters and not enough menus. You offer the envelope. Claude says the eggs are safe. Her smile freezes. Not dramatically, just a fraction of a second too long. Then she takes the envelope and slides it beneath a tray of croissants. Take one, she says, almost absently. No charge. You do. And as you bite in, flaky, buttery, criminally good, she reaches under the counter and produces a jar of cloudy water. She sets it beside the cash register like it's the daily special. Iodine and starch, she murmurs. For testing, the old ink trick. Potato base? You nod. She gives a low chuckle. Too bad it smells like feet after 3 days. Otherwise, it's a lovely way to send secrets. You realize she's not joking. She leans forward, eyes glittering now. Let me tell you something, she says. When this war is over, We'll be able to tell who really fought by the stains on their laundry boards. Ink, starch, wine. Some agents smelled like they were fermenting in their own codes. You chuckle, but she's only half joking. That's the strange thing about wartime espionage. It's not all gunfights and parachutes. Sometimes it's vinegar under your fingernails and a notebook soaked in lemon juice. Because yes, lemon juice was another go-to invisible ink. Heat it up and voila, your message reappears like a ghost on the page. But it had problems. Overheat it, and the message burned into a dark, smoky smudge. Underheat it, and it stayed invisible. A dud. So they tried everything. Milk, onion juice, even urine. You heard a story once. Possibly real. Possibly whispered nonsense. About a British soldier who scrawled crucial intel using urine and a sharpened matchstick on his handkerchief. Carried it folded in his boot across enemy lines. By the time he arrived, the message had faded, and the commanding officer made him urinate on it again. That part might be made up. Maybe. You hope. Historians still debate how widespread these strange inks truly were. Some say they were used only in rare cases. Others argue that entire divisions were trained in the fine art of bodily fluid espionage. No consensus, just echoes and odd stories, traded over tea in dusty libraries. But what is certain is that by mid-war, counterintelligence had caught on. They started scanning letters with heat, with iodine vapor, even with ultraviolet light. Censorship offices became part chemistry lab, part confession booth. Thousands of letters were intercepted, steamed open, and tested. Sometimes they found nothing. Sometimes they found everything. The baker is watching you now, gauging your reaction to all of this. Do you know what they used during the revolution? She asks suddenly. You raise an eyebrow. Sympathetic ink, she says, wagging a finger. Gallic acid and ferrous sulfate, invisible until you brushed it with another solution. Washington's men used it. So did the French resistance. Then she adds, with a smirk, We've been hiding things in plain sight for centuries. My dear, you just inherited the trade. You glance around her shop. To most people, this is flour and butter and long afternoons. But to you, it's a front. A carefully arranged chessboard of innocuous detail. The chipped teapot on the back shelf hides a false bottom. The baguette rack, 3 slots too deep. And the daily specials board? It lists raisin bread 2F, apple turnovers 3F, and scones 1F. But those just happen to be the floors where agents live in the building next door. She's not just a baker. She's a librarian of codes. Every sugar dusting, every smudge of dough is a breadcrumb in a much larger trail. And yet, she still offers you a second croissant. Still asks if you've had enough sleep. Because even spies, she insists, need breakfast. You thank her and slip out the door, chewing thoughtfully. Outside, the town is coming to life. A delivery boy whistles tunelessly. A cat darts across the road with a stolen fish. A bell chimes above the apothecary, and as you walk, you pull out your own notes. Tiny scraps, mostly gibberish, but to trained eyes, possibly plans for something huge, hidden among mundane sentences, waiting to be coaxed out with vinegar, starch, or sweat. You remember a lecture from training. The perfect message should look like a recipe or a love letter, something harmless, silly even, because war is loud. But secrets whisper. Your next stop is the station. An envelope awaits, wrapped in brown paper, marked with a fake return address from Marseille. Inside, perhaps, the real reason you're here, or maybe another test. You wouldn't be surprised if it's both. You hold the envelope against your chest for a moment before tucking it inside your coat. No need to draw attention. Even here in this sleepy little French town where the worst scandal yesterday was someone stealing 2 pears from the grocer. But you know better. Every quiet town has its own volcano rumbling just beneath the cobbles. You just happen to be one of the tremors. At the station, you find a bench tucked in the corner, near the newspaper rack. A perfect spot for accidentally forgetting your scarf if things go south. You slide the envelope out, careful not to break the seal just yet. First, you scan the street. A man pushing a wheelbarrow full of carrots. 2 girls giggling in pigtails. 1 suspiciously disinterested pigeon. Then, with practiced fingers, you unseal the envelope and pull out a single folded sheet of paper. It's written in tight cursive, in violet ink. At first glance, it's just a letter from someone named Aunt Lucille, the kind who always sends their love and includes 3 too many exclamation marks. But then you smell it, just faintly, potatoes. You reach into your coat pocket and remove a small vial of iodine solution. The baker gave it to you earlier, tucked into the lining of your croissant bag. You dab the solution onto the paper in 3 even strokes. And slowly, like a photo developing in reverse, the hidden text begins to emerge. Depot confirmed. Movement tonight. 3 crates. Code, orchard. Beneath it, another line forms. Do not eat the apricots. You smirk. Another code, or maybe someone just really hates apricots. Either way, it means your evening plans have changed. Historians still debate the frequency and complexity of such wartime communications. Some argue that ciphers were used primarily for top-tier messages, while others believe that even low-level operatives had layers of coded redundancy. There's still discussion about the effectiveness of natural inks like potato juice. Some say they were outdated by 1942, others insist they were making a resurgence due to their accessibility and the growing scrutiny of conventional inks. You tuck the paper away, and with it, your uneaten second croissant. Tonight, you'll need energy. The walk to the edge of town is slow and deliberate. You stop to chat with a florist. You pet a cat. You buy a small tin of sardines, which will later serve as a paperweight for maps you haven't drawn yet. You are, in every sense, a citizen of routine. Nothing to see here. You reach the apple orchard just as twilight begins to pour over the trees in soft, syrupy streaks. Rows of gnarled trunks stretch out before you, their branches casting crooked shadows on the dirt path. The air smells like leaves and old wood, and somewhere in the distance, a nightjar calls out, as if reminding you, yes, this is all very normal. You step into the 3rd row and pause at the 7th tree. Underneath, half buried in the dirt, is a small wooden crate. It's been dusted with apple leaves, as if it fell from the tree. You kneel, brush them aside, and lift the lid. Inside are 3 objects, each wrapped in brown paper. You unwrap the first. It's a shortwave radio, compact and dented, with a thin coiled antenna. The second is a bundle of documents, bound in twine, reeking of onions. Not metaphorically. They were clearly stored near a produce crate. The 3rd item makes you pause. It's a tin of apricots. You almost laugh. Almost. You set it aside, unwilling to test the limits of wartime humor. Instead, you leaf through the onion-scented documents, maps, supply logs, names, some real, some false. There's a list of coordinates with strange botanical labels: cherry, walnut, ash. It hits you then. The trees aren't just a cover. They're the code. You trace a finger down the map and recognize the layout of the town. The bakery is Chestnut. The police station? Pear. That would make the Orchard Depot Apple, of course. It's so obvious now. You wonder how you missed it. You remember Claude, your mentor in this strange game of starch and silence, once saying, "The best codes aren't clever, they're just boring." People overlook boring. They don't question a grocery list or a recipe for stew. But maps? Those can hang in plain sight if you just call them orchard notes. As you pack the materials into your satchel, you hear a crunch. Not a twig, a footstep. You freeze. Every breath you take now is rationed. A figure emerges from the trees. Slim, wearing a scarf, carrying a fishing rod. Strange time for fishing. stranger still in an orchard. He stops when he sees you. "You're early," he says. You say nothing. He tilts his head. Or late, depending on who sent you. The standoff stretches. Finally, you say, "Claude sends his regards." His eyes flicker. He nods. Once, "That man's too fond of tubers," he mutters. "Come on, we've got a ways to walk." And just like that, you're following a stranger through moonlit rows of apple trees, radio strapped to your back, the scent of potato ink messages still clinging faintly to your hands. He doesn't speak much, but when he does, it's useful. "They're tightening inspections," he says. "Last week, they caught a courier using paper sewn into coat lining. Had to eat half of it before they could grab him." You glance over. "Paper? Rice paper," he clarifies. "Edible. Tastes like betrayal and regret." You make a mental note. Somewhere nearby, a church bell tolls. Once, then twice. Time to vanish again. You trail behind the man with the fishing rod. His steps quiet against the soft grass, like someone who's used to not being remembered. He doesn't glance back often, but when he does, there's something appraising in his gaze, as if he's checking whether you're the sort of person who survives long enough to be useful. The orchard gives way to a narrow path that snakes between two hedges. Beyond them, a field stretches wide and quiet, moonlight soaking the landscape in silver. You pass a scarecrow with a lopsided hat, its arms raised in what looks suspiciously like a surrender. You wonder if it ever wanted this job. You wonder the same about yourself. At the edge of the field, a low barn leans into the wind like it's tired of standing. The man nods toward it. "We're using this tonight. Don't touch anything in the southeast corner. It's not for you." You step inside. The smell hits first. Hay, motor oil, and something vaguely peppery. Inside, a cluster of people sit around a crate lit by a single lantern. One woman is unrolling lengths of thread between her fingers, coated in beeswax, you think. Another is polishing a pair of boots that clearly contain more than just feet. You're not introduced. Names are unnecessary here. What matters is function. One nods to you. The map? You pass it over, and she holds it to the light. A faint potato scent still clings to it. "Natural ink, bold," she murmurs. "Risky, untraceable," you reply, shrugging. "If they catch it, it smells like lunch." She grins. Historians still debate whether local networks leaned more heavily on edible ink or ciphered phrases hidden in folk songs. She says, almost to herself. Both had charm. One tasted better. You sit down on an overturned bucket and pull out your notebook. Time to update your own notes, though these won't be written in ink. You sketch patterns into the margin, dots, lines, a triangle. Later, when this notebook is left behind in a bakery window, someone will know exactly where to meet you based on how that triangle touches the page's edge. You glance across the barn. The woman with the boots has started sewing something into a jacket hem. You know what it is. A rolled-up piece of onion paper soaked in lemon juice, which only reveals its message when exposed to heat. She'll pass it to a teenage cyclist in the morning. The boy will tuck it into his sleeve, ride to the next town under the pretense of delivering a ham sandwich, and never even know he's carrying war plans next to his elbow. It's funny how fragile revolutions are. Ink that disappears when it gets wet. Paper that burns at a cough. Messages you can only see if you iron them. Your thoughts drift to the Allies' broader, invisible ink operations. You once heard that British intelligence had developed multiple classes of invisible ink, labeled A through H, each with its own properties. One kind activated with iodine, another glowed under UV light. Still another reacted only to specific metal ions. And then, of course, there were the absurd ones. A favorite among handlers was milk and spit. Easy to acquire, impossible to prove, and about as gross as it sounds. You'd write with it, and later, the recipient would use powdered potassium permanganate to reveal it. The resulting color? A dramatic purple, like bruises on paper. There's even a story, likely apocryphal, that agents once tried using semen as invisible ink because it didn't react to iodine and dried clear. But it had drawbacks, you're told, including a rather inconvenient smell. Whether or not this is true, historians still argue. Some dismiss it as tasteless rumor. Others insist it's tucked away in a forgotten file at MI6, marked "Do Not Reheat." You shake the thought off. Not bedtime material. Back in the barn. The radio crackles. Everyone stills. A woman steps forward, her fingers moving deftly across the dials. "Meteor forecast incoming," she says. "Code for a scheduled broadcast." The signal is faint, distorted by the barn walls, but you catch the pattern. Static, chirp, pause, then a voice, clipped and staticky, delivering what sounds like nonsense. "Red shoes at dawn, the canal is thirsty, spoonful of vinegar." You all wait. Then comes the final phrase, "The orchard will sleep." Everyone exhales at once. It's the confirmation. Tonight's drop is approved. No red alerts, no canceled rendezvous, no sudden disappearances. The man with the fishing rod pulls out a folded paper, a checklist. "Pack and move in 20. Be orchard by 1. People scatter into motion. One woman lifts a false floorboard and reveals a crate filled with potato sacks. Real ones. This time, not code. You're handed one. Inside, 3 glass bottles of iodine solution, a sheaf of onion skin paper, and a guide titled 20 Ways to Boil a Letter Without Reading It. You almost laugh, then realize it's not a joke. Out in the night, the field breathes. You pack quickly, layering your satchel with enough tools to start a stationery store, then throw a canvas over your shoulders. Someone hands you a ration tin marked sugar. Inside, is lemon juice concentrate and an eyedropper. Outside, the wind picks up. You fall into step with the others. 5 shadows moving under stars, each carrying their own piece of an unfinished message. You wonder, as the orchard nears again, how many messages were lost over the years. Not intercepted, just forgotten. Evaporated before heat could reveal them. Ink made too faint. Potatoes cooked too long. Secrets faded into paper that would later line someone's kitchen shelf. Historians still question how many wartime messages remain undiscovered, hidden inside heirlooms, baked into book spines, written on the backs of recipes from Aunt Lucille. One day, someone might dust off an old letter, apply iodine just out of curiosity, and read the words. "Tonight, 3 crates, orchard, do not eat the apricots." But for now, those secrets remain with you, and the path stretches ahead, each step quieter than the last. You crouch among the trees again, this time behind a bramble of blackthorn, its berries slick with dew. The orchard has changed since your last visit, though the layout remains the same. The trees still rustle with night wind, and the earth still holds the warmth of an August day. But now there are more of you. Shadows multiply in war. They gather in 2s and 3s, whispering plans or simply waiting for a signal no one wants to miss. To your left, someone unwraps a bundle of cloth and pulls out a thin metal box about the size of a postcard. You know it well? It's a field-developed chemical pad used for testing invisible ink on the go. Just dab a corner of a paper. Wait 10 seconds and watch the secrets emerge. Or not. Invisible ink might seem like a quaint tool in the age of broken codes and cracking safes. But here, it's everything. Not flashy, not fast, but silent. Trustworthy. Intimate. The woman across from you, the one with the peroxide-colored hair and a tendency to hum lullabies under her breath, is carefully drawing a shape onto a white scrap of fabric. She's using potato juice again, boiled down, filtered through linen, then cooled just enough to stay clear. The fabric is thin, muslin, maybe. "What's it say?" you whisper. She shrugs. "Just a number and a direction. It's for a pigeon. You blink. You're sending messages by pigeon? She nods. Sometimes people still expect to see a bird. It's a layer of nostalgia that throws off suspicion. Pigeons are cute. Envelopes are dangerous. She lets out a short laugh. Historians still argue whether the pigeon network was mostly symbolic by this stage in the war, or if it truly carried crucial messages. Either way, birds got medals. And it's true, the British awarded medals to war pigeons. One, named Sher Ami, even survived a gunshot wound to deliver vital coordinates that saved nearly 200 men. If that bird had hands, it'd be holding a martini right now. Your eyes follow the muslin note as she tucks it into a tiny capsule, then threads it into a canvas harness built for wings. The bird will leave at dawn. Across the orchard, two men lift a metal canister from beneath the roots of a gnarled apple tree. It's not large, about the size of a thermos, but you know its value. Inside are documents, ink bottles, acid vials, and flame pens, tools for making and breaking messages. One false move, one missed mark, and it all goes up in smoke. Literally. You recall a story someone told you, back in London. A handler had once designed a pen with a hollow core, filled not with ink, but with two chemicals that only activated when mixed. If the pen sat upright for more than an hour, the chemicals touched, and the pen combusted. That was your signature delivery method. Leave the pen on a desk, and the inked paper inside the drawer would light up on cue. It's small-scale magic. Science bending to the needs of war, like something from a Jules Verne novel, only with more paperwork. The orchard is full now, nearly a dozen agents moving in tight coordination. You wonder how many others are scattered across Europe this very moment, each with a different variation of this plan. Some using mashed prunes as ink, others squeezing letters into buttonholes. One rumor says a Dutch agent once sent a whole message via bread crust carvings. You had to toast it to read it, they said, as if that was completely normal. The woman with the pigeon lifts her arm. The bird launches, wings slicing upward into the night. You all pause, heads tilted. No sound but feathers and wind. Someone murmurs, "Off to tell Churchill what color socks to wear." You smile. The quiet absurdity of this world grows stranger with every passing hour. Beneath a nearby tree, another agent is heating a tin plate over a camping stove. A piece of paper rests on top. The message is starting to appear in streaks and stains, faint brown lines forming shapes like constellations. It's a report from a resistance cell across the border, written in urine. Not glamorous, but effective. "You'll smell it before you see it," the agent jokes, pinching his nose. But hey, it works. Historians still debate the full scope of these homemade ink formulas. Some say the French maquis used wine diluted with copper salt. Others argue that beetroot ink dominated Eastern Europe's codes, its hue faint enough to vanish under candlelight. Everyone agrees. However, that potatoes, humble, lumpy, and usually bound for soup, played a bigger role than anyone expected. One researcher once tried to catalog all known WW2 invisible ink recipes. The list reportedly ran over 50 pages. Vinegar, honey, cornstarch, aspirin paste, baking soda, egg whites, mustard seed oil, soap residue, you name it. Someone tried it, some worked, some failed. One even melted through a desk. That one was quietly retired. Back in the orchard, someone is sketching a map, not of roads, but of safe houses. Each tree on the drawing represents a location where a message can be dropped. A person can rest, or a plan can change course. You memorize the shapes as they form. Curved branches meaning bakeries, square ones indicating butcher shops. Circles are churches. Triangles are forests. You've never realized how much war depends on people who know how to draw trees that mean something entirely different. Your part in tonight's drop is nearly done. You've passed your packet, confirmed the location, and memorized the symbols. Now it's time to vanish again. As you stand, brushing leaf litter from your trousers. You catch one final sight. A young boy slipping into the orchard from the far side. No more than 15, wearing oversized boots and a coat too thin for the weather. He carries a lunch tin. You know better than to ask what's really inside. He looks scared, but determined. You nod to him. He nods back. Then he disappears into the deeper part of the orchard, where someone waits with a kettle, a candle, and just enough heat to read the truth hidden in fruit juice and starch. You walk away, boots silent on the soil, and wonder how many times this has happened. How many generations of people have hidden knowledge inside the ordinary? A message in milk, a plan in a pear, a rebellion in a spoonful of boiled potato. And then the thought comes, slow and sleepy. If truth is something you can hide in dinner, maybe hope is too. The air has shifted. You feel it in your shoulders, your knees, the slight sting of sweat cooling against your collarbone. That orchard is far behind you now, replaced by train stations, half-whispered passwords, and the steady hum of diesel engines tucked beneath camouflage netting. You ride in the back of a supply truck, wedged between crates labeled as kitchen flour and field medical kits. None of it contains what the labels claim. One box, double-lined and sealed in wax, holds a typewriter with keys rearranged to mimic an older German model. Another contains tiny ceramic jars, each no bigger than your palm, filled with dried potato starch. Officially, it's emergency food for starving soldiers. Unofficially, it's the raw material for dozens of invisible messages. Flour for letters. You'll never look at mashed potatoes the same way again. Across from you, a balding man with a crooked nose and a navy scarf runs his fingers along a folded piece of paper. It's blank to you, but not to him. He knows what's hidden in the layers of the fibers. He's trained for this. Heat, pH, even smell. He can read a letter no one else even sees. You admire his calm, the way he sits like he's on a park bench waiting for pigeons. He taps the side of the crate. "This one's going to Zurich," he says. "You raise an eyebrow? That far?" "Mm-hmm." And then passed along by watchmakers. Dozens of them. One letter, 30 wrists, all ticking toward the same lie. Historians still argue whether the Swiss network was truly neutral or just exceptionally good at hiding bias. What's agreed upon is this: watches and letters moved together, snug in tiny compartments or scribbled onto warranty slips. Time, like ink, is not always what it seems. The truck rolls on. You bounce with every bump, lulled by the rumble. The balding man continues. "Ever seen a spy's sewing kit?" You shake your head. He pulls out a needle case, flips open a secret bottom panel, and shows you 5 tiny scrolls, no longer than a fingernail. Paper wrapped in thread. He grins. "Ink made from lemon and potato? Heat it just right, and you'll get coordinates. Overheat it, and it just looks like lunch." You chuckle. Someone's ruined a lot of sandwiches experimenting with this stuff. Better sandwiches than entire operations. That's the strange truth, isn't it? So much of this war has depended not on bullets, but on precision, on knowing exactly when to press an iron to paper, exactly how many minutes to boil a potato before the starch becomes clear enough to vanish on the page, but still strong enough to reappear under the right touch. It's kitchen science turned into espionage, chemistry turned into a whisper. The truck slows. You hop out. Boots hitting cobblestone in a town you'll forget the name of within a week. You duck into an alley where another agent waits, an old woman with strong shoulders and flour on her apron. She hands you a shopping list. Bananas, tea, 2 jars of pickles, matches, batteries, toothpaste. She looks at you. "Which line's the message?" You scan the list. The word pickles is underlined in pencil. You run your thumb over it. No ridge, no indentation. But you notice that the loop on the second K is slightly off. a half-stroke higher than it should be. It's the sign. Pickles means 2 days, you murmur. This drop happens in 2 days. She nods. The brand matters too. Make sure it's Heinz. If they use Del Monte, the plan's off. You can't help it. You laugh, low and quiet. So now we're judging intelligence operations by condiment labels? She shrugs. Whatever works. Historians still debate how much of this coded domestic behavior was deliberate, and how much was just people playing pretend to feel useful. But the records, what few were kept, suggest a vast, decentralized network of grandmothers, grocers, and school teachers, all carrying potato-based secrets in the most mundane ways imaginable. Some used library cards, others scribbled on milk receipts. One man was caught passing coded potato ink messages written on hymnals, only detectable when warmed gently by candlelight during evening mass. He served 5 years in a German prison, and never once confessed how he did it. You hand back the list. The woman tears it in half, shoves the top portion into a garbage can, and places the bottom into a teapot. "It'll be brewed by dinner," she says. "The ink won't survive the steeping, but the leaves will stain just enough." You glance upward. A plane drones in the distance. You wait for the all-clear siren, but none comes. That means it's not an enemy. Not yet, anyway. At the corner of the square, a boy on a bicycle glides past, holding a loaf of bread under one arm. You squint. The heel has been carefully sliced and replaced. You know what's inside. You nod. He nods back. You head into a tiny repair shop where an old man is buffing a broken radio. You place a tea tin on the counter. "From your sister," you say. He doesn't look up. Just places a folded piece of cloth onto the counter and pushes it toward you. It's a handkerchief with an embroidered design. Flowers, vines, a few insects. But you know better. You squint, hold it up to the light. The stems aren't just decoration. They spell out a word, one you recognize. The next rendezvous point. You smile. "Beautiful work." His hand trembles as he nods. "My wife stitched it before she died." There's silence between you for a few beats. Then he reaches beneath the counter and hands you a baked potato, still warm, wrapped in paper. Inside, folded tight and tucked under the skin, is a message. Written in starch, developed by fire, destined for someone you'll never meet. "Potato ink, in a potato, somehow, you're not even surprised anymore." You step outside again. The wind is cool now. Evening is setting in. You hear the call of church bells down the street. People are sitting at cafe tables. Children chase one another. Someone plays an accordion badly. But with heart, you breathe it all in. This is how the strangest science of war lives, quietly, not in the labs or bunkers or bombed-out command posts, but in knitting needles, lemon juice, candle wax, and spuds baked just long enough to carry the truth. You step off the curb, one hand on your coat pocket, where the stitched cloth still rests. The road ahead is winding, shadowed, and full of strange cargo. You follow it anyway, because somewhere out there, someone needs the message that only a potato can carry. Night has fallen, and you're walking beside a narrow canal where shadows deepen and reflections double themselves. The cobblestones are slick, catching glimmers from shuttered lanterns and curtained windows. No footsteps echo but your own. Somewhere in your coat pocket, the stitched handkerchief crinkles softly when you move. You don't check it. You already memorized the word, an old village name, half forgotten even by the locals. A place where trains never stop unless someone pays the conductor in silence. You pass a baker's shop where the display window holds nothing but crusts. The real bread, you know, is stored below, in a room whose floorboard creaks on a G-sharp. That's the note to signal caution. You stop beneath a lamppost and pull from your sleeve a pencil stub. On a postcard of a shepherd and his sheep, you draw a potato with 3 eyes and an arrow through it. Then you casually toss it into the public trash bin across the street. Someone will retrieve it, not because of the drawing, but because the bin itself is slightly loose. It rattles when the message is inside. That's how absurd this has all become. But absurdity, you've learned, is the most reliable form of camouflage. Down by the docks, a boat sways lazily against the tide. It bears no flag, no number, just a line of laundry strung from bow to stern. 2 socks, a towel, and a woman's slip with the hem turned up exactly twice. Code, of course. The dockhand, white-haired, bent like a comma, pretends to swab the planks. When you approach, he doesn't look up. "You're late," he mutters. "I'm always late," you reply. He hands you a glass bottle of vinegar. "This is for cleaning windows." You nod. Naturally, inside the bottle is a rolled paper straw that unfurls when submerged. Vinegar neutralizes the starch, but only after the heat from your palm warms the glass long enough. Chemistry disguised as housework. You step aboard. The boat slides into the canal like a whisper. Around you, the city still sleeps, or pretends to. In a war full of tanks and bombs and marching boots, you move through the world armed with potatoes and pickles, thread and lemon juice. Historians will try to piece this together one day. They'll argue over timelines, decode what few documents remain, debate whether you were brave or simply desperate. But they'll never understand the feeling, the constant dance between invisibility and revelation, the strange comfort of writing your life into the fibers of a napkin, the quiet glee of holding a torch to a blank page and watching meaning bloom like a bruise. No archive can capture that. As the boat drifts under a low bridge, you lie back against a crate labeled farm tools and close your eyes. You hear the water lapping, the slow squeak of oars, the distant strike of a cathedral bell somewhere past midnight. Your body relaxes, not because it's safe, but because it must. Because tomorrow brings more lists, more recipes with secrets, more candlelit decoding over chipped enamel cups of weak tea. But for now, you let the darkness rock you. Let the strange science of sleep wrap around your shoulders like a wool coat pulled tight against the chill. Potatoes, you think vaguely. Who would have guessed? And with that, you drift off, slowly, gently, into silence, into sleep, into history.
you